LeRoy B. Simpson is, perhaps unsurprisingly, an episode of the Doris Day Show that's all about LeRoy. And this is the 7th episode of the first season, directed by Bob Sweeney, and this aired originally in November 1968. And it starts off with Aggie and Doris baking bread, and it's a beautiful, wholesome scene, and Doris begins to laugh. This is Doris Martin, of course, played by Doris Day, and Aggie is played by Fran Ryan. And Doris begins to laugh. Aggie asks her what she's thinking about, and Doris mentions that she's just thinking about the time when they first met LeRoy, and they first got to know LeRoy. And then we have a flashback scene, and the entire thing is told from the time when they first met LeRoy. And it's all about how he came into their lives, and maybe some mistrust that some of the characters had towards him, and also the influence he had on the young boys, of course, being Billy and Toby, played by Philip Brown and Todd Starke. LeRoy is played by James Hampton, and he's definitely a likeable character, but I think they got across the message quite clearly that they might not have been able to trust him to begin with. As you would with a stranger, you would be very cautious around them, and there were various reasons why they perhaps didn't want to trust him, and I thought they handled the element of mystery quite well, and they kept certain information back to keep things surprising and quite fresh. And I thought that worked very well. I do think some of this, the narrative flowed not as perfectly as it could have done. It kind of went from the boys, without spoiling too much and giving too much away, it went from the boys sneaking food into the barn to feed LeRoy, to LeRoy being in their house quite quickly, and it kind of glossed over a few questions that I had, and it didn't answer everything about who LeRoy was, where he came from, how he found the house, how he got to know them, etc. There were certain gaps in the narrative, and I didn't have all of my questions answered. But generally, I got the feeling, I kind of understood how they first felt about him, how they first treated him, and Doris Martin gave a great display of trust at one point, and I thought it was really admirable. Risky, but quite admirable. So I enjoyed it. I think it's probably the weakest of all of the episodes I've seen so far. That's not to say that it was a weak episode, but whereas up until this point I've basically had nothing but glorious praise for all of the episodes, this is the one where I've been able to actually identify things that were maybe not as good as they could have been. The pacing wasn't as good as it could have been. The information in certain parts was maybe rushed or glossed over, or not really answering all of the questions that I had. So it's not perfect. It's kind of good, actually. Part of me is kind of pleased that I've been able to think a bit more critically about this episode, because it proves that I'm not watching these with rose-tinted glasses, and I have just genuinely loved every episode until this point, and I did really enjoy this. Of course I did. But it just wasn't quite the same quality as the rest. With regards to the songs in it, usually Doris will sing some beautiful songs, and with this particular episode, there was no song in it. I don't think there was anybody singing anything at any point. And I think that may be the first time that this has happened. I know we're only 7 episodes in, so that's not saying a tremendous amount. But that's also something that it was lacking, where every other episodes shine. I should also mention Buck, Doris Day's father, played by Denver Pyle. He gave a great performance as well, and I think his attitude was probably the most realistic. The way he felt about LeRoy to begin with is probably the most believable. But I enjoyed it, of course I did. I would happily watch it again. But LeRoy B. Simpson maybe isn't the same quality as the 6 episodes that came before it.